So, for today's video we are making a cheese and spinach lasagna, and to do that we're gonna start off by making our own pasta dough. If you don't want to make your own pasta dough, there's timestamps in the description, so you can skip this step. And there's also an estimation of how much pre-made dried lasagna plates you can substitute the pasta dough for in order to maintain the amount of calories. But to do the pasta, we're doing it the traditional way. We're creating a well under flour, which we're adding 2 eggs to and some salt. And then we're using a fork to stir in the eggs. And when we have mixed that with enough flour so that the eggs won't run all over the counter, we're using a bench scraper to add some additional flour to the eggs. And when that's done, we're just going to start to knead the dough. However, using 200 grams of flour for 2 eggs I feel is a bit low in hydration, so it's going to become difficult to get the pasta dough to come together. So what I like to do is that I like to rinse one hand under cold water, or just water, and then continue to knead the dough, because you don't need a lot of water to get the pasta dough together, but you're probably going to need some. So then we're going to knead the dough for roughly 10 minutes, and after that wrap the dough in plastic wrap and leave that on the counter. This lasagna is quite cheese heavy, and that's because when I made it I had a lot of cheese over that I needed to use before it turned bad, and I think it came out quite nicely. Our next step is to cut the end of one leek and then cut it in half. And what we want to do then is to clean it properly between the different layers, because for leeks you usually get a lot of dirt between the different layers, and that's not nice at all to get in your food. And then we're just gonna roughly chop that. No need to do anything fancy, just roughly chop it. Then do the same thing for an onion, roughly chop it. And finally we are going to peel 3 cloves of garlic, which we're later going to press into the mixture. And after the garlic, it's time to grate some cheese. And as I said, this is quite a cheese heavy lasagna, so we're going to use 100 grams of Grana Padan cheese, and we're also going to use 100 grams of Parmesan cheese, and later on we are going to add 250 grams of ricotta. This is our mise en place and everything we're going to need in order to make our lasagna filling. And to do that, we're going to start off by adding 1 teaspoon of olive oil to a hot pan, then adding our leeks and then our onion, and then we're going to add some salt and some pepper and give that a fry for a couple of minutes until it is cooked through and dry. And when that's done, we're going to add 2 deciliters of white wine. I think 2 deciliters is something like 0.84 cups. And then we're going to reduce our cooking wine until there's basically none of it left. And when we've done that, we're going to add 300 grams of frozen spinach that we're going to thaw and cook as well. And it's important here to get rid of all the water within the pan, because if you don't reduce the amount of water till there's basically none left, your lasagna is going to be dry and soggy. Then we're going to place this in a bowl and let it cool down while we make our bechamel sauce. And to do that, we're adding 70 grams of butter and 70 grams of flour and 1 liter of milk. That's 10 deciliters or 4.2 cups. So just start off by melting your butter, adding the flour, and cook that for a little while. There's going to be some small bubbles on the edges, and that's fine, it's nothing to worry about. And when you've cooked the flour for a little while, you're just going to pour your milk in. You don't need to worry if you have a hot roux and cold milk, there won't be any lumps. so it's gonna be fine. It might look scary, but there's nothing to worry about. So basically just pour in the cold milk into the roux. So what we want to do is just keep whisking until the lumps have disappeared, and keep this on a medium heat. And then we want to add some salt, some pepper, and what I like to do is also grate in a little bit of nutmeg. You don't need a lot, just some. And then keep whisking until it's thickened up. And when we feel it's thick enough, I like to take a bit of plastic wrap and put that on immediately, because that will keep skin from forming on the top of your bechamel sauce. And then we're just going to remove that from the heat and finish our filling. That means adding 250 grams of ricotta cheese and the rest of the cheese. And we want to do this when it's cooled down a bit, because if we would add this directly to the pan, the cheese would get stringy and a bit weird in texture. So it's better to let it cool down a bit. Final steps are to add the juice from 1 lemon, and then taste and add some additional salt that you might need, and a pepper if you want to. And that means that we are done with our filling. So what we want to do is preheat our oven to 200 degrees or 400 Fahrenheit. I think it's like, to be precise, 394 Fahrenheit or something. And while our oven is preheating, all we need to do now is finish our pasta dough, flatten it out, and to assemble the lasagna. So I'm using the KitchenAid pasta attachment. You can do this by hand, and I like to go to thickness 5. Start off at 1 and then work yourself up to 5. And what I also like to do is, after I've run this through the first time, to fold in the edges, because it's easier to actually assemble the lasagna if the edges are fairly flat. And when our pasta dough is done, we are going to start assemble our lasagna. And we're going to make this in 2 layers. So first layer is going to be half the filling. Just take half, spread it out. And after that, we are simply going to take our bechamel sauce and add it too. And the bechamel is going to be in 3 layers, so we need to use a third here. I like to use a pizza cutter to cut the pasta dough, because then you can be fairly precise in order to fit it to your pan. And the pan I'm using here is roughly 31 centimeters long, and if you use that size of a pan, you will get 2 layers of lasagna. If you use different shape, you might have to adjust accordingly. And you want to make sure you don't get an overlapping layer of pasta dough, because then it will be too thick and too chewy. So 1 layer is enough. We're done with the first layer, then we're just going to do our second and final one, meaning we add the rest of our filling, then top that with bechamel sauce, and we want to make sure here that we'll leave enough to cover our last sheet of pasta dough. And that's almost it. All we need to do now is a bit of fitting, and you might need to use some small bits and pieces to fit everything, so everywhere has some pasta. And that's it. Just cover it with bechamel sauce, and we are almost done. Final step. Place it in the oven for around 40 minutes to an hour. I think I had this in for 50 minutes. And after 50 minutes it looked like this. It's apparently hot in the oven. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy.